Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Montreal singer and songwriter Sonia Johnson. We caught up with her recently about her newest 2019 CD, Chrysalis, and after carrying out a multi-year pilgrimage of experimentation in jazz and pop music, she has emerged from out of the shadows and into the light with this new CD. It means a lot. It's her first English language album. She is a graduate from the University of Montreal's master's program and would go on to win the 2012 Juno Award for Vocal Jazz Album of the Year. Please get to know her and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for the music. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks to you for having some interest in it. It's very nice.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So let's talk about your latest 2019 CD, Chrysalis. Give me an idea of what the kind of the vision of this project was.
Before writing in English, I'm a francophone, and you can probably hear that with my wonderful exotic accent. I'm from,
yes.
I grew up in French in Quebec, and so mostly before I wrote in my mother's tongue. And for this project, more and more in the past years, I collaborated with people and I started writing in English. And for this project, everything came out in that language. I'm kind of emerging from new languages, like the language I'm using with the lyrics, but also the musical language that I've learned by going through the process of a master's program in composition in jazz. Recent program, I've been back to school at 38 years old. I did a bachelor's and a master's degree. All this together made this music that is more, there's some influences, like I wrote with the 12 tones rose, and I wrote with modal arrangements and the colors of the music. But then I took everything and I just stayed in the music for a year and made something very more personal and less academic with it. It's the first time I took like a long time to, that's why I called it Chrysalis, because I stayed in the cocoon for a long time to express truly all the influences I had in the past, and like pop, folk music, stuff that I grew up with and that is part of my background.
So talk to me a little bit about growing up in Quebec and kind of how you got involved with music.
There was always music in my family. I started singing at church every Sunday morning. I did that from the age of 5 to the age of 50. And I also learned the violin, but at 10 years old, I said to my parents that they should invest in something else. That wasn't my thing. So I've learned music. My mom sings, all my sisters sing. And then I started doing classical singing when I was 15. I moved to Montreal to study classical music, and then I met this bass player named Michel Donato, who taught me the basics of jazz, and it changed all my course there.
So what did you learn in school about singing? How did that help you in your career?
Well, in jazz, I was mostly a self-taught learner because I studied in classical, and then I went to School of Life. I've learned to improvise and perform jazz by playing with musicians in small clubs, and I've learned all the repertoire by listening and participating with them. It's only at 38 that I went and learned a different way of seeing improv or songwriting, for example. It brought me into different universe so that I can be able to write my own arrangements, like on that album. I did all the horns arrangements, vocal arrangements, and mostly all of the compositions, even though I have great partners in some of the songs as well.
So what were some of the early jazz albums you listened to that really got you into the jazz world?
Oh, well, I think I got a lot of influences from Ella Fitzgerald, that's for sure. She was one of the singers that I got hooked on. Sarah Vaughan and Dinah Washington, also Anita O'Day. So those were the singers I was really into when I started. But I was also practicing when I started writing, I would use like Thelonious Monk or Charlie Parker's pieces and put lyrics to it in French as an exercise when I started to write music. So it's kind of diverse in a way.
So it doesn't get any higher in Canada than the Juno Award. You have one of those. Talk to me a little bit about how that feels.
Well, that felt great because mostly in that category of vocal jazz album of the year, usually it's won by people that are singing the standards. And I arrived there with a completely original project that I wrote with it's in 2012, so I was more shy with my compositions. I do have a lot of compositions on that album, but I've put some composers and lyricists together to write stuff for me. And it was all in French, and it was all original music, and that's what I'm very proud of, that in that category, I was able to express myself with something, with not standard music, like with original music.
What was one of the first live jazz shows you saw that really blew your doors down?
I think it was Diana Krall, in fact. Yeah, in Montreal. Was it possible that she was with Charlie Hayden? A long time ago. Yeah, Diana Krall.
So how do you think jazz is doing in 2019? Are you happy with where it's at?
I think we have a very creative, I can base myself on what's happening in Montreal. We have a really creative scene. A lot of people are collaborating together, and we make things happen. I work with, for me, I'm very grateful because I am, as a singer, you have to be the leader of your projects, but now I'm being called by other musicians to be the voice of their project, and that's what I mostly did in the past 2 years. I was collaborating with this guy called Rodrigo Simoes. He does the Brazilian original music. I sang with Felix Tusi on a project with Ray Anderson on trombone as part of an octet where I was also like a horn with the band. I did experimental voices on keyboardist, more jazz prog rock project. So it's alive. We do projects. We bring the music to the people, and we try to make it as alive as possible.
So why do you love jazz?
Because I can live in the moment, like on that album that you are sharing with your listeners. It's recorded, it's there, and it's in a format more for radio, let's say. But when we go into concerts, there's different arrangements of the music. I'm gonna improvise. So it's the spontaneity of that music that attracts me, makes me feel alive, and makes me feel like I can reinvent myself every time I'm singing a song. And that's the beauty of that music. That's why I got hooked on it, for the spontaneity and the creativity it can lift us up with.
So let's say you come to Kansas City and you perform, say, off 18th and Vine at one of our venues, and you have to kind of come up with a way of getting people to come to the show. How would you describe what you give to an audience live?
I would describe it as positive, uplifting. Also, in the lyrics, I go into different subjects. Sometimes it can be dark, but it's hard to describe. There's a diversity in the music also. We can call it jazz, we can call it pop, we can call it adult contemporary, but mainly we should call that like spontaneous and very close to the people. I like the connection, the interaction with small venues and the crowd.
My final question to you is this. Everyone has their perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a resilient person that is and a creative person and a solution finder person. Yeah, that like I'm doing these recordings. I put myself out there, and I always did it by myself as my own executive producer. Now more and more my own composer, my own producer. And yeah, I think I'm resilient and strong and courageous. And this album, Chrysalis, it's mostly about like a more even complete transformation of myself, like accepting a lot of things from life and becoming this butterfly, emerging from the cocoon and showing our colors in a different way this time.
That's perfect. It's a great answer. It's a great ending. It all comes full circle like the butterfly. So, Sonia, thank you for taking some time out for Neon Jazz. I really appreciate it, and good luck with everything.
Thank you to you, Joe. Take care.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers in Montreal, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Sonia for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com for everything Neon Jazz all the time. Go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.